Bonjour, nous allons reprendre la séance cet après-midi avec une présentation faite par the Pew Charitable Trust. Cette présentation s'appelle Global Ocean Legacy and Australian Corals. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, it's my honour to be sitting here and talking about what I think is a wonderful project, the Global Ocean Legacy Project. And to my left is Jean-Paul Michel, who's the director of the project in France. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Global Ocean Legacy, a short story about it, and then we're going to focus on one particular area, which is the Coral Sea. And tomorrow, the global director of the project, Matt Rand, who's sitting there in the front, texting, is going to tell you the story of the whole project in more detail. So, right. Well, I know this audience knows that we're at a crossroads with the ocean, that the ocean is in serious trouble and it needs our help. And there's a whole lot of different ways that we can help improve the health of the ocean. And one of them, of course, is the subject of this conference, which is marine protected areas. Marine protected areas, or protected areas in general, have a long history on land. And in fact, the world's first protected area on land was Yellowstone, which was made in 1872 in the United States. Some call national parks America's best idea. And I'm very proud to say, as an Australian, that Australia created the second national park in the world, a Royal National Park just south of Sydney. Now we have thousands of protected areas on land around the world, and some of them are really large scale and protect a wide range of species and species that move over large areas. Some of them, like Yellowstone and Yosemite, like Kruger, and in my country, Kakadu National Park. These are big, grand areas, and they work very effectively in protecting the wildlife and habitats. In the marine world, the very first large marine park was established again in Australia in 1975. It was the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park, but the reason for establishing that park was to stop oil and gas drilling. And it was very effective. It was an incredibly effective campaign. And it stopped that, but it didn't restrict fishing at all. And it wasn't until 2004 that a network of no-take zones was established in the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. But for over 30 years, really nothing happened in the rest of the world at the same scale as the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. And then that all started to change in the middle of the last decade. And that's what Global Ocean Legacy as a project is all about. It's about establishing the world's first generation of great, fully protected marine parks. We know we need networks closer to shore in intensively used areas. We know we need good fisheries management. We need ecosystem-based management. But we also know that we need a network of these very large, grand-scale, fully protected reserves around the world to act as reference sites and sanctuaries for wildlife, so that we have some sense of how the world used to be going into the future. And now I'd like to show the first video. So that gives you just a very quick overview of our work. And here's a global map of where we're working. So that's a summary of the places you just saw. The red dots are places that have already been now declared. So there's 4 of them. As you can see, the Papahanaumokuakea, Mariana Trench, Coral Sea, and Chagos. And the blue dots are where we have active campaigns. So I'm just going to do a quick fly-through for each one of these, and then I'll tell you a bit more about the Coral Sea. So these are the completed campaigns. Chagos, and some of you would have seen the short film last night and seen how beautiful this area is. It's the largest fully protected marine reserve in the world. And I have to point out 2 people in the front row who are very, very, probably the world authority, I'd have to say, on Chagos, Charles Shepherd. So this is really a spectacular jewel, over 50 individual coral atolls and islands. It's quality and it's quantity, and however, we would love to see that eclipsed in scale in the future. So that's what we are hoping to do. This is as I say, Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument in the northwest Hawaiian Islands. Again, a very intact area, beautiful coral reefs, relatively pristine. It was declared by President George W. Bush in 2006, and in fact placed him as the world leader in declaring marine reserves until Chagos. The next one is the Mariana Trench, Marine National Monument. It's the deepest trench in the world. There's lots of hydrothermal vents, an extraordinary biological community, or extraordinary communities, I should say, that depend on the hydrothermal vents. And the picture there is of the Friends of the Mariana Monument, and they're receiving an award from a couple of Pew staff who are in this audience for the hard work and the effort they put in to achieve this fantastic result. That is a picture of the Coral Sea Marine Reserve, but I'm going to tell you a lot more about that a little bit later. It's about 1 million square kilometres, and just over half of it is fully protected. Now, these are our active campaigns that haven't yet been declared. So the Kermadec is the second largest, or second deepest, I should say, trench in the world. It's an extraordinary area to the northwest of New Zealand. It has also a very deep trench. Coal methane seeps, lots of volcanic islands. You can see one behind me. Also, there's an amazing story to tell about the actual campaign, and I know Matt will tell you more about this, but it represents a marriage of science, conservation, and art. And so this campaign has been all about New Zealand's top artists showing the beauty, the mystery, the magic, the emotion of this region. And thousands of New Zealanders have gone to art galleries to see this, and there's a huge amount of support in New Zealand for this to happen. Easter Island, which is a province of Chile, otherwise known as Rapa Nui, which is the easternmost point in the Polynesian Triangle. Again, another extraordinary area, very intact. The people of Rapa Nui, through the work that they've done with Pew, are really motivated to have a marine reserve in their area. They feel, as Polynesians do feel, a very strong, deep historic connection to the sea. And again, there's a big story to tell about a Polynesian cultural exchange from Rapa Nui, from French Polynesia, to New Zealand, where the Maori there and the Rapa Nui talked a lot about their connected historical cultural roots to the ocean. Pitcairn Islands, well, I hope all of you went to the party last night. If so, you would have heard the 2 Pitcairn Islanders talking about their strong and heartfelt desire to have a marine reserve in their area. And that's a picture of the whole, I think it's the entire population of Pitcairn Island, and 56 people, I think. And the council passed a unanimous decision that they want a reserve in their waters as well. And some of the islands in that area are incredibly pristine. And then moving to a very cold place, South Georgia, South Sandwich Islands, which is part of Antarctica, has very high levels of marine mammal diversity and a very abundant and diverse seabird life. And finally, Bermuda. And this is a very live campaign right at the moment, because it's right now there's a public consultation process happening in Bermuda for the people of Bermuda to decide whether they want a fully protected marine reserve in their waters. And we're very confident that most of the people will be saying yes very loudly. This would be what's called a blue halo around the Bermuda Island, a halo of full protection. And the last slide on this fly-through of our work mentions 4 other sites where we're just really starting our work: in New Caledonia, in French Polynesia, Tristan da Cunha and Palau. And I'm hopeful that when Impact comes around next time that you'll see some declarations in at least 1 or 2 of these areas. So to the Coral Sea, which has been my privilege to work on for the last 6 years. And this is a beautiful bathymetric picture of it. And it shows the diversity of habitats there. There's lots of coral atolls, lots of tiny little islands. There's over 30 little islands. There's big plateaus, there's continental slope, there's an abyssal plain, which is about 4,000 metres deep, heading up to Papua New Guinea. There's a chain of seamounts, there's deep sea canyons. It's just, again, a wonderful area, which supports a tremendous amount of marine life, ranging from, I think there's about 36 species of seabirds. There's an enormous diversity of deep water shark species. There are 52 known deep water shark species. About 19 of them are endemic. There's about 28 species of whales. There's the world's only known spawning site for black marlin. That's actually a sailfish down there, but black marlin are very numerous in the area. It's yellowfin tuna. It's an ancient living fossil, a nautilus. It's globally important for green turtles. That's actually hawksbill there. But it's an abundant area. It has been affected by some fishing, so it's not pristine, but it's still intact. And now to the next video.
This is a place where there are huge numbers of sharks, tuna, all these things, swordfish, sailfish, that you just don't see in other places. Huge schools of these large predatory fish that require huge areas to be at that sort of numbers. And so in a sense, it's like the Serengeti of the sea. This is the chance to have vast areas with large numbers of herbivores and predators, more or less functioning over a huge scale in a way that the world once was like. The Coral Sea sits between Queensland, the Solomon Islands, New Caledonia and Papua New Guinea. Less than 1% of the world's oceans are in no-take zones. The world's oceans, in some senses, there's common resources for all countries and all people to provide sustainable food. A tiny fraction of it is conserved, and of that tiny fraction that's conserved, most is in lots and lots of tiny little small parks. What marine scientists have said is, ultimately, if we're to maintain some assemblage of a fully functional marine system, we will need at least a few very large marine parks scattered around the world. So, if you like, places like the Coral Sea were at the moment not heavily exploited. There's a very small fishery of 11 types. Probably if you did the economic analysis, you would say they weren't even profitable. This is an area of almost a million square kilometres, and it's hardly exploited by the Australian fishing industry. We wouldn't be displacing many fishing industries or people from that area if we made it a large marine park. So in some sense, this is a chance for Australia to have one of these huge marine parks in its own waters, one of the maybe dozen that would actually be the backbone of the global park system. Well, I feel as though we do have a responsibility to have a few examples around the world where the full ecosystem is intact and functioning in a normal way, and the Coral Sea represents an enormous opportunity for that.
Professor Hugh Possingham, who I'm sure many of you have heard, is an ecological mathematician and developed Marxan. And now someone else you'll know.
I'm Sylvia Earle. I'm a marine scientist, an explorer in residence at the National Geographic. I've been splashing around in the oceans of the world over many years for thousands of hours. I have come to Australia to lend my voice, my support, my view concerning the Coral Sea and urge you to do everything you can to go for the highest level of protection for the Coral Sea. We have one chance now to get it right. If we wait, some of the things that are now possible to do, those opportunities will be lost, and they'll be lost forever. Coral Sea has given the world, given to Australia, blue Australia, so much for as long as humans have been around. It's time now for people to give back, to take care of the ocean that takes care of us. Use your power. Use your voice. Let Tony Burke, the Environment Minister of Australia, to let him know that you care and urge him to use his power to do whatever it takes to bring about the highest level of support for the Coral Sea. It's an insurance policy for Australia. It's an insurance policy for the ocean. It's an insurance policy for your life, because the ocean really gives to us so much. It's time for us to give back.
Well, I could pretty much listen to Sylvia forever. That was a video that was made when Sylvia was in Canberra, and that was actually done in Parliament House. And she came several times to Australia and weaved her magic with the politicians there. I don't know if you're seeing that. Sorry. I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about the campaign itself. What we tried to do was to create the Coral Sea into an icon, because no one really thought about the Coral Sea when we started this campaign. The Coral Sea happens to be right next to the Great Barrier Reef, which is certainly the most popular ecosystem in Australia. It generates over $5 billion of wealth for Australia every year, employs hundreds of thousands of people. And it also is subject to an awful lot of pressure along the coastline, so it's always an issue. And beyond the Great Barrier Reef was this forgotten part of Australia. And so our job was to create that forgotten part of Australia into an icon that everybody cared about. And that is Osprey Reef, which is the biggest reef in the northern part of the Coral Sea and the most popular tourist site. And that is North Horn, which is one of the top 10 shark dive sites in the world. And I've been lucky enough to dive it twice. We also created a vehicle for the campaign, and that vehicle was to get lots of NGOs involved. In fact, we got 15 NGOs involved. We called ourselves the Protect Our Coral Sea Coalition. We created a logo, and everything we did was under that banner. That was our core team, which was together for about 5 years. And we just kept communicating to the public over and over again. In a variety of ways. There was a lot of free media, there was a lot of paid media, we had billboards, we had print ads, of course the website, and our job was just to make people care about this magnificent area. And one of the ways, probably the most successful thing that we ever did from a communications perspective is what I'm about to show you next.
G'day, Barry Rass here. Our Coral Sea is unique. It's our Amazon, the Serengeti of the seas. And it's special because as Australians...
Hi, Barry.
G'day, only we can protect it. Visit the website and ask our PM to make our Coral Sea the world's largest marine park. Can you make a difference? You bet your Rass.
Authorised by D. Kindley Science, AMCS Brisbane. Spoken by Al Perry.
So everybody loved that ad, and we used to have kids running up to our banners on the street saying, "There's Barry!" That ad was so popular that when we first showed it, we paid for it, but there were lots of TV channels who loved that ad so much that they kept showing it for free. And also that ad was shown in the main cinemas throughout Australia and the main screens in urban shopping centres throughout Australia for nothing. So when you get a good ad, it really just keeps multiplying in its benefits. We also had a really big outreach focus Our team would have conducted thousands of events. One of our staff members did on average one event every weekend. As you can see, we used all sorts of tools. That cinema full of people is watching Planet Ocean. And of course, the event that we had around it focused on the Coral Sea. We had loads of different ways of getting through to people, whether it was through young people, through kids, through mothers. We just had lots of different target audiences and targeted our media towards whoever we really wanted to speak to. But largely, we just organised lots of events, small and big ones. And I'm now going to show you some more examples.
Hi, I'm Valerie Taylor, and I'd like to share with you my passion for protecting the Coral Sea. Australia's marine life is the envy of the world, and our Coral Sea is one of the least impacted ecosystems on Earth. Its crystal clear waters are home to majestic whales and turtles, rare sharks, powerful marlins, and a diversity of tropical reefs teeming with fish. If you've been lucky enough to go to this ocean paradise as I have, you'll know that Australians are fortunate to have such a global marine icon on their doorstep. But the Coral Sea needs our help if it's to stay this way. Less than 1% of this marine icon is protected from fishing, mining, and oil and gas drilling. Less than 1% of this ocean paradise. But here's the good news. The federal government is now considering the long-term protection of this tropical jewel. A very large, highly protected marine park in the Coral Sea will provide a safe haven for our ocean wildlife and give them the protection they so desperately deserve. Please, don't wait for tomorrow. Go to protectourcoralsea.org.au to sign a quick submission and ask your friends to do the same. Together, we can leave a lasting ocean legacy and create the world's largest marine park in the Coral Sea.
Val Taylor, who did the voiceover for that, is famous in Australia. I'm not sure if you know her globally, but she worked with Steven Spielberg on the movie Jaws because she was a shark diver before it really became popular. She's happy to dive with great white sharks as well. She used to be a spearfisher woman, but she gave that up when she saw what was happening to our marine life and has become a very, very strong advocate for ocean protection. And she's a household name in Australia, which is why we used her. I want to show you a couple of other videos now of some of the other work we've done. This next one is an amalgamation of some, I guess, what we call ambassadors, maybe in other countries celebrities, mixed with just ordinary people. And we put it together to show just how many people were supportive of this campaign and encouraging people to put in submissions.
Hi, I'm Valerie Taylor.
Need the next one.
How you going, folks? I'm John Williamson, and I'm standing in front of the National Park at Springbrook, Queensland, where we're not allowed to go in and shoot and kill birds and animals for food or knock down the trees. Of course not. Now, under the ocean, there are hundreds of threatened species, so I'm 100% behind a huge marine park in the Coral Sea.
Coral Sea is one of the world's last great refuges for marine species, and right now we have a historic opportunity to turn it into one of the world's greatest marine parks. But we need your help. Please sign up and help us protect the Coral Sea.
Hey guys, check out the website and sign up to help us protect the Coral Sea.
It's a national treasure that deserves to be protected for the enjoyment by future generations.
It's not only about my grandchildren, it's about Ruby's grandchildren.
Let's protect our Coral Sea.
G'day, I'm Pat Rafter. Let's all do our bit. Let's help protect the Coral Sea.
Hi, protect the Coral Sea.
I think we should do it.
Protect the Coral Sea, please.
Sorry you don't know many of these people, but they're household names in Australia, many of them. Australia's top novelist, Tim Winton, top country and western singer, John Williamson, top fashion designer, Akira Isagawa, and so on. And then the next one. The next one, I'll just say before we start, was our team in Brisbane wanted to get school kids involved. And so they worked with the Department of Education, and they got all the primary schools across Brisbane engaged in a celebration of the sea, focusing on the Coral Sea. And then the kids were encouraged to create artworks focusing on celebrating the ocean. And then they put them all up in a series in this venue, and then the kids came in and they had a look at it.
To be revealed, and every time we fish, we're just destroying those adventures.
So we've all heard of the barrier reef, right? But have we ever heard of the Coral Sea? It's just as important.
Please protect our Coral Sea.
Protect our Coral Sea. Please save our Coral Sea.
Please protect our Coral Sea.
Please protect our Coral Sea. Save our Coral Sea!
So anyway, we just did a lot of those kinds of things. And at the end of the whole process, which went on for several years, we had generated over 100,000 submissions to the federal government. We generated over 600,000 submissions with the help of Avaz, who did a global cyber action for us. We achieved the highest number of submissions of any environmental issue in Australian history. And we did a poll which showed that 70% of Australians thought the federal government's Marine Reserve announcement was the best decision that the government had made up to that point. And still, over a year later, Australians thought it was the fourth most popular decision of the last term of government. The other three more popular ones were about health issues, free dental care and things like that. So to have marine reserves right up there was pretty fabulous. And I think the current government, the new government, is very cognizant of the fact that marine parks are very, very popular in Australia. So that was the before. That's what the Australian Marine Park Estate looked like before. Most of it was in the Great Barrier Reef. And that's what it looked like afterwards, with the biggest blob being over the Coral Sea. The green bit is fully protected. The grey bit with the spots, it allows a little bit of line fishing, but all the line fishermen want to get out, and they've asked the government to buy them out. So essentially it would just allow some recreational fishing. That's just over 200,000 square kilometres. And then the light blue and yellow bit allows long lining, which was personally very disappointing for us. Still, it was an incredible result to get over 500,000 highly protected. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of a thank you video that the team put together to thank all our supporters. I'm not going to show you the whole thing because it's a little bit long.
G'day, Barry Rass here. Our Coral Sea is unique. It's our Amazon, the Serengeti of the sea, and it's special because as Australians,
hi, Barry.
Only we can protect it. Can you make a difference?
Gives you a flavour. It keeps going on for quite a while. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Jean-Paul to talk about the other part of the Coral Sea.
Thank you, Imogen. Hello. Just a few words. Just to learn you that the GOL program, the Global Ocean Legacy Program, has just joined the team project led by the government, the Caledonian government in Noumea, and working on the implementation of the MPA within the World EEZ. And the World EEZ represents 1.4 million square kilometers. And we hope this EEZ will be protected. When you see the limit of the Australian Marine National Park, you can dream about the setting up of an ecological corridor linking Caledonian Lagoon to the Great Barrier. And the New Caledonia is an hotspot for the biodiversity, and with close to 10,000 identified species. The New Caledonia is also one of the largest lagoons in the world, with 24,000 square kilometers. And at last, New Caledonia welcome iconic animals like whales, like sharks, turtle, and in the middle of this slide, a dugong, a strange animal called dugongs. Yes, and we want to dream with the Australian government because the Caledonian government has signed intent letter in 3 years ago in order to have a common management about this rich area called Coral Sea. Thanks for your attention.
It's not over yet. So this one, yes, this one is a very unusual. I've got 2 more videos to show. And this one is a very unusual video for a marine campaign. And it needs a bit of explanation before I start. When we started out with this campaign, when we mentioned the Coral Sea, particularly in Queensland, the first thing that would come to people's mind, if they were over 40 years old, was a battle that occurred there in May 1942. It was the biggest naval battle that Australia had ever been involved in, and continues to be. And it was a really important change for Australia because we'd always looked to the United Kingdom to save us. But from May 1942, we started looking to America. And Australia felt that it was under threat, and so Britain wasn't helping, so the United States came. And so Australia joined up with the United States and fought this battle against the Japanese Navy. And the Navy was pushed back, and it was the first time that it happened in the war in the Pacific. So it has enormous strategic significance in Australia, this battle. And there are still veterans alive today, less at the end of the campaign than at the start of the campaign. And we felt it was really important to honour them, or to recognise the cultural and historic significance of the Coral Sea. And so we decided to reach out and interview some of them and hear their story and get their thoughts of what they thought of protecting the Coral Sea. This is actually a 7 or 8 minute video, but I love it and I hope you do too. So. That is not the right video. It's the one before.
Everyone in Australia should remember it. It was right on our coast.
I reckon it saved Australia, and I really think that it probably did. And nobody seems to care much about it.
The Battle of the Coral Sea is of great historical significance to Australia, but it's a battle that is very rarely remembered.
A lot of people don't even know where the Coral Sea is. It's important that they know how close the war came to our shores.
What the Japanese were trying to do was to control the waters around Australia and prevent Australia being supplied from America. The Allied forces had much better signals intelligence, and they were able to intercept Japanese communications and predict that they were going to attack Port Moresby, and that allowed them to pre-position their forces into the Coral Sea to intercept the Japanese invasion fleet. The Americans were able to deploy 2 aircraft carrier groups based on the Lexington and the Yorktown. A carrier group might consist of half a dozen or so smaller ships, both cruisers and destroyers. and could be spread out across an area of perhaps 20 miles. The two Australian vessels, Australia and Hobart, were combined with the American carrier groups to provide added protection. The first major action of the Battle of the Coral Sea was the sinking of the Japanese aircraft carrier Shoho by American aircraft. During the battle, the American commander sent the Australian-American cruiser group to block the Japanese invasion fleet from coming to attack Port Moresby.
And all of a sudden, the siren sounds. Every man to his position.
The Australian-American support group were attacked by a great number of Japanese aircraft.
Everybody was firing guns and so forth.
All you can do was hear the bangs on both sides.
They didn't really have time to be scared. They didn't have time to think about it because they were too busy sort of protecting themselves.
It was a vicious and quick kind of a battle.
The only time I think I was a bit frightened was after we were torpedoed and we didn't know whether we were going to sink or what was going to happen.
And the ship's bouncing from side to side with near misses, and the things are going bang, bang, and you think, well, I'll be 1,000 pieces here in a minute.
But through skillful ship handling, they were able to defend themselves and none of the ships were lost.
We were lucky. We never copped one.
At dawn on the last day of this 6-day battle, the American and Japanese carrier fleets were desperately trying to find each other to put in a killing blow. When the Japanese found the American fleet, their aircraft attacked both of the American aircraft carriers, Lexington and Yorktown.
And the Lexington was blown into two halves. They lost a lot of men there.
The general talk was how lucky we were not to be sunk. Somebody else was sunk, we weren't, so we were lucky.
The Australians didn't lose anybody, fortunately. The Americans, however, lost over 500 men killed, more than 60 aircraft, and of course, the carrier USS Lexington.
I felt awful that they'd lost so many on our coast. And I also felt they were great fighters. At the time they were needed, they were there. And this country must never forget them.
The Battle of the Coral Sea was the first time in World War II that the Japanese experienced failure in a major operation. The damage caused to the major Japanese carriers, Shokaku and Zoikaku, meant they couldn't take part in the later Battle of Midway. And of course, the Battle of Midway was a real turning point in the Pacific War in that it meant the Japanese lost the initiative.
Something like the Coral Sea ought to be sort of remembered. Most of my friends that I speak to, that there's not many left now anyhow, but they all think that there should be a memorial of some sort. I think it should be some sort of maritime reserve of some sort that ought to be sort of protected more than it is.
The Battle of the Coral Sea is of great historical significance for Australia. The heritage value rests in those ships that still rest on the bottom, and of course, the many young lives that were lost during the battle. It deserves to be remembered by everyone, because in reality, it should be up there with Gallipoli and Kokoda.
You know your great-grandfather was in the war?
No.
He fought on the ships out there. They were coming in and dropping bombs, one after the other.
Why?
And never hit us once.
Why not once?
Well, they didn't aim straight, did they? Looking back, I don't think I've done anything ever any more important than the Coral Sea battle. Makes you very proud. I get a very satisfied little feeling inside me. Enough to keep me alive till I die.
sadly, Ted Simpson in that film passed away a couple of years ago. So we're very glad that his thoughts were preserved in that film. And actually one other... Oops, I haven't really got time to tell you this. But anyway, very, very quickly. Obama and Gillard, the former... Julie Gillard was the former Prime Minister of Australia, and President Obama came to an agreement to find those warships lying in the bottom of the Coral Sea. And now the CSIRO, the Woods Hole Institute, Parks Australia, and National Parks USA are working together to fund a big research trip that will go in a brand new ship, research vessel, in 2015 to the Coral Sea to find those ships and to do some exploratory research on what they find in the deep ocean in 2015. So it's just amazing what's coming out of this, and there will hopefully be a whole lot of new species found as a result of finding these vessels, and that will, I'm sure, spill over not just to a whole lot of understanding of what's down there, but also to much stronger political support to keep this reserve. We've pretty much run out of time, so I can't show you the last video, but it was just more beautiful pictures of the Coral Sea. But you've seen plenty already. So thank you very much for your time.